This week we're going to be talking about reliability and validity. Very, very important to engaging in empirical research because essentially with empirical research you're trying to measure things. It could be through the use of self-report or instruments or reaction time data or anything like that. But in order to get reliable results and sort of having the same thing over again and to get results that are actually examining what you're intending to examine, it's important to talk about these things during the semester. So I'm going to start off with an example. You've all been exposed to this, and actually the example I'm going to use, a lot of you in the class have actually been trained on this, so hopefully it'll be something that you can relate to. So we're going to talk a little bit about measurement error because measurement error affects reliability and validity, and we're going to be talking about that. So Mrs. Jones has come to your office for her annual checkup. Your staff shows her to the exam room and she sits in the room to wait for you. Your nurse comes in first and asks her a few questions. Then she takes Mrs. Jones's blood pressure with the blood pressure machine in the room. Your nurse actually records it to be 150/85. You also have a medical student working for you this month, and you ask the student to go into the room and take a brief history and check her blood pressure, Mrs. Jones's blood pressure. The student talks to Mrs. Jones and then takes the blood pressure using their own blood pressure measuring. I know what the word for that is. I can't pronounce it, which is why she's not using the machine in the room. She's using her own. And she records the pressure to be 155/90. You enter the room and you greet Mrs. Jones, who's one of your long-term patients. And as you talk to her, you take your blood pressure again with the machine in the room, and you get a reading of 135/80. Which one of these is correct? Is any of them correct? And so we could talk a little bit about the different reasons why these might have different ratings. And so one of the reasons I'm using this example isn't just to make it relevant to the people in the class. It's I went to the doctor yesterday and I had my blood pressure taken with one of these machines. And that's the way in our office that the doctors and nurse practitioners tend to use. It hurts. It just like pinches and like my hand starts going numb and all of that. And so I complained about it. And they said that the nurse I was working with, she said that she prefers using this because lots of times when you do it this way, there's mistakes. And she pointed out like she had been trained by somebody when she was learning how to do this. And it was obvious that the person that was training her did not know what was going on. I mean, like all the students are looking at each other. And so it has the potential for a lot of error. And so her argument is that these things are more reliable. They're going to measure the same thing over and over and over again. And so that might get you to ask, well, why did person one, the nurse here, have a reading of 140/85? And then why did this other measurement have 135/80? Well, it could be just sort of fluctuating between maybe the person's more calmed down after 3 visits of this and have being talked to and things like that as they go into it. Maybe they, it's been longer since they actually walked into the office and all of that. And that could have possibly affected that. And so this was a slightly different reading here. Or maybe the nurse practitioner is reading, rounding up a little bit to the numbers and you're rounding down because it's exactly a 5-point difference between the two. Now what about the student here? This is wildly different from the other 2 readings, and it suggests that there might be some serious problems with your patient's blood pressure. And so several things. It could be measurement error because this person is actually a new student, not new, but they're not as experienced as the nurse or as you yourself, the doctor, is experienced. Also, it could be the cuff that they're actually using, or maybe they did it incorrectly, or the person's wiggling around. And so there's a lot of different reasons for why this might be higher. But we're talking about different reasons why these things could be. The person could change. They could have been more relaxed, and maybe that's why the readings were different. The way things are measured and experience might also do it. Could be little things like rounding error, or it could be like in this case, maybe there's a 5-point fluctuation in the machine. It needs to be calibrated, or maybe one of these is wrong. And so we're going to talk about these differences when we're talking about measurement error and reliability and things like that. So measurement error, when people measure anything, there's always going to be chance fluctuations, and these chance fluctuations are error. It doesn't matter what you are measuring and with what type of instrument you're measuring it, because no 2 moments in time are ever exactly alike. You're probably going to see some minor fluctuations in your measurement across time, even if you do things what you believe to be exactly the same, because the conditions are constantly changing. It's ironic, but actually the more precise you can actually measure something, the more likely it is that you'll be able to see these chance fluctuations. If you have kind of a very coarse measurement, and it only measures things in big units, then perhaps, a small change, it wouldn't even register it. It's not sensitive enough. When you have incredibly sensitive instruments, it picks up all little things. I remember when I was a postdoc, actually, they had a machine that it was working at the electron, actually the atomic level. And so they actually, like, it was on the third floor, they had to have actual dampers in it. And this is like, I think the whole building was like maybe 4 floors high. And they had to worry, they had dampers in the room because even like wind blowing against like a 3-story building, it's not very big, it could pick up those slight movements because it's measuring at such a precise and at such a small level. And so we're going to start talking about these different types of errors in the next video.